Welcome to It's Later Than You Think, the podcast about living in the moment, enjoying the ride, and making the most out of our lives. I'm your host, Patrick Ailshire, a 40-something-year-old Wisconsinite, sharing my experiences and encouraging you to rethink time, purpose, and everything in between. Let's make the most of right now. Hello, and welcome to another episode of It's Later Than You Think podcast. Got a good one for you today. I hope you all enjoyed your Father's Day weekend, whatever that looked like for you. Perhaps you celebrated with those around you. If you're a dad, you're a stepdad, you're a pet dad, all very important. For anyone that was perhaps missing their dad, I hope you were able to think back to those memories, relive the days that your father was around, and that at least brought a little bit of a smile to you during that time. My weekend was very nice. On Friday, which was the 13th of June, I celebrated my 42nd birthday. So just talking about, it's later than you think. It's each and every year you get closer to the end game. And it is, kind of interesting to take a look at your life up to this point and where it's headed in the coming years. So I was able to do a little bit of that while enjoying the day. On Saturday, I went to another mesh meetup for coffee, since it had been a couple of weeks, and I met two new people that were new to mesh, which was great to see. Hopefully they enjoyed themselves and will be returning for another meetup at some point. So overall, a fairly productive weekend. This episode, we learn about the world of mushrooms. Not quite the psychedelic kind, more the gourmet side. But my guest this week is my Uncle Kevin. He was gracious enough, amid his busy schedule, to jump on a call last week and discuss the new hobby that he has come across the last few years. We also chat a little bit about the legend of Bigfoot. Some of you may know as Sasquatch. And that is a really entertaining bit from the interview. All right. Well, I am very excited and eager to chat with my next guest, my Uncle Kevin. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, Pat. Great to be here.
Thanks so much. We were talking a little bit off the air about a conversation I had with your son, James, a few months ago. He was the first family member that I interviewed, and you're the second. So I think the Kukan family is definitely kicking ass compared to everyone else.
James has a gift to gab. I have a bit of a gift to gab, but certainly not on the level of yourself or James for that matter. So this will be a somewhat truncated version of the podcast you did with him, but thrilled to be here. Very happy to be here. This will be fun.
Yeah, it's part of the reason I enjoy doing the interviews more, because I do get to sit back and listen more so than just chat everyone's ear off. But so yeah, we'll go ahead and roll right into those questions. So I'd love for you to hear a little bit more about your little side hobby project gig that you've got going on. How did the idea for Rock River Valley mushrooms come?
Well, I'm a teacher by trade, so this will be a little bit of a longer story, but I'll bring it full circle eventually. I taught for 10 years in the Waukesha School District. During that time, I also self-published a couple of books on what was at the time called School to Work. And I self-published them, designed them, went out and sold them, and eventually sold the copyrights and everything. And the reason I mention that is because this kind of entrepreneurial thing, and it's nothing that I tried to do overtly, it just kind of happened. It was just kind of like one of those things I was kind of compelled to do. I left teaching and I got into K-12 publishing. So I was working for publishing companies, selling, I was in sales, I was in training, I was doing a number of things there. And then about 12 years ago, I actually left and I started working with a startup. So again, kind of this entrepreneurial feel for it. And we were actually building the startup from the ground up. After 3 years, that got to an acquisition. It was actually a husband and wife here in Wisconsin who had developed a data visualization tool that schools use to aggregate all of their data. So I did that, and I took about a year and a half off. But then I was found by another startup, and this one is out in San Fernando, in the Silicon Valley, rather. And we produce artificial intelligence-based content filters. Same thing. I was the fourth employee building it from the ground up. So the point is that what I'm about to share with you just didn't come out of nowhere. The idea to grow mushrooms kind of did, but the idea of, hey, why not? Let's try this has been in me for quite some time, and I really can't explain why that is. But with the mushrooms, certainly this has been kind of an organic, pardon the pun, experience. And frankly, it probably started with a conversation I had with my wife, Missy's, one of her brothers, probably 6 years ago. He lives in California, and we were just talking about, different things going on. And he had mentioned that a friend of his was growing shiitake mushrooms and different types of mushrooms and stuff like that. And I started looking into that. And we've got a big yard here. We've got big woods and a lot of space. So in terms of growing things outside, we had the ability to do that fairly easily without a whole bunch of neighbors looking at us and stuff like that. So I began really self-studying and reading, and frankly learned a lot through YouTube videos. And that was 5 years ago now. And at that time, the whole Paul Stamets had his video about mycology, and that was 5 years previous to that, I believe. So a lot of people are starting to kind of feel the momentum with regard to mushrooms, not necessarily from the gourmet side, which is what we do, but really from more benefits health-wise and cognition, lion's mane and reishi and a lot of these types of mushrooms. So I've grown those, but that's not what our focus is. Our focus is more on the culinary side. So anyways, the last 3 years or so, we began to kind of learn some of these processes for a variety of these mushroom types, some of which will grow outside on logs, oak logs, and some of which are grown indoors in a climate-controlled setting where we control the temperature as best we can, the humidity levels, CO2 levels, those types of things. So, yeah, and honestly, without my partner, my wife, Missy, I think I'd be doing it, but we probably wouldn't be where we are now in terms of having this company, because she's been extremely supportive. It's strange, it's a weird thing to do, to decide to start growing mushrooms, and it is kind of one of those scenarios where people are like, are you okay? What are you doing? But the fact of the matter is that there's a lot of interest in mushrooms and in culinary mushrooms. And where we live in between Madison and Milwaukee, flyover country, we're on the edge of the two metro areas here in Watertown. And not that people in Watertown don't have access to some of the nice higher end food items, but a lot of times they don't. So what we found is going to the farmer's market this year, we've sold out. Every time we've been there, there's a real appetite. Again, another pun, but there's an appetite for these culinary mushrooms. Oyster mushrooms is what we grow primarily, as well as shiitake and wine cap, which grow outside as well. So, yeah, it's been an interesting experience. My son James, aforementioned James, was involved in helping us build out the website. Our niece Jane was involved in some of the design elements as well. So, so it's labor intensive. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I do still have my day gig, So a lot of this work that we're doing in terms of inoculation of buckets and things like that relative to growing is taking place after my workday as well as on the weekends. But it's fun. Missy and I are doing it together. And honestly, it's fun to grow stuff. I know you live in an apartment. I don't know if you have any plants or anything or vegetables, but it's fun to see stuff grow and starting from nothing to, I mean, these things will double in size once they start to grow. They will literally double in size overnight. It's stunning. You walk into the fruiting tent and they will have, I mean, they're just beautiful, just bouquets of these things. So yeah. So anyways, it's really been a lot of fun. Who knows where it goes? I mean, like I said, I'm not leaving my day job anytime soon, but I'd be lying if I said we weren't talking about some other ideas to kind of build this out a bit and look at some other related avenues to this. So yeah, so it's been interesting.
Yeah, that is very interesting. Just as far as how when you started this a few years ago, you kind of knew that based on your experience with these startups that you'd be able to at least put the effort in. It wasn't necessarily some of those nerves that we talk about in the podcast about, taking the first step and just putting yourself out there. You've done that before. And so I'm sure it was very nerve-wracking the first organization or company that you joined with a startup. I mean, that phrase just gives me anxiety, but you've done that already a couple times. So you knew that, okay, I've already got my day-to-day career. I'd love to see if I can take this hobby, into start snowballing and.
Yeah. And, even though I said that before, I've never looked at it really until you just said it at that kind of granular level. And there is a lot of truth to that. Now, granted, my work in bringing products to market per se, and again, I'm just a math teacher, you guys. I'm not a marketing guru, but I've been in K-12 now for 37 years. So you learn how school administrators think. You learn how teachers think. I mean, it's just kind of innate. So in bringing a product to market, the times that I have, both in the books that I published as well as the software applications, it is, yeah, it's strategic thinking, and certainly being part of a startup, you're chief cook, bottle washer, you do everything. The roles are not defined. If somebody needs to do a blog article, it's done. If somebody needs to look at, standardization with some set of compliance topics, somebody's got to do it. So you hop in and do it. So that same mentality, I guess, can be applied to starting any business for that matter. You have to kind of have some organizational sense with it, but a lot of it is gut and knowing the market, and you have to do your research. You just can't dive into something. And I did. And there's a lot of research that's out there in this particular agricultural niche. At least there is now. Over the last 3 years, it's really blown up. But I looked at different studies that were, published by Cornell, another one that was done through the state of Kentucky, just at commercial mushroom growing, the ups and downs, yield estimates, things like that. Stuff that I never, ever thought I wouldn't care about it. And I wouldn't certainly use it from a business standpoint. Yeah, so it's kind of the bringing together a variety of skills. And Missy, my wife, is a former English teacher, so she brings a set of skills here as well. And you're a former teacher, and teachers just, I don't know, the mentality in a teacher is you just do it. You just kind of forge ahead sometimes. I mean, and you've got your 8th period class, which is a horrible class, and it starts, and you just go. You just plow through it. So there's that a little bit of that mentality, I think, that carries over into this entrepreneurial vibe as well, where you just go ahead, damn the torpedoes, and you just move. If you believe in it, you go.
And to that point of being in education previously myself, and you still being in it, what hard work is and what it takes. And so I think back now in my current role where, yeah, I'm busy, but busy to me is when I was teaching and always having to be on. You had the kids in the classroom all day, maybe a 15-minute break here for recess or a lunch break or when they're in their specials. You just had to be prepared. There was no really wiggle room to, I forgot to look at this lesson. what are you going to do? You have to be on. So, and now going into more the corporate or government side, it's okay. I have things to do, but I also have a checklist of things I know I can manage this. This is going to be fine. And when things might seem overly hectic or stressful, for me, it's not. It's like, okay, it's just time management and organization skills, which I already have those. But before we go on to our next question, the name Rock River Valley mushrooms, where did that come from?
Yeah, we were thinking about different names, and my kids are sixth generation here in Watertown. And so there's a bit of a tip of the hat to the region. And, Watertown is kind of significant. The Plank Road was built in 1853, 5 years after statehood here in Wisconsin. And the Plank Road, anybody from Wisconsin probably knows that, Watertown Plank Road, but that was a hub of commerce. The breweries, drove a lot of that and a lot of the industry that was popping up in Milwaukee. And consequently, that also stopped at the Rock River. So you had all this agricultural product coming down the river. So the point is that Watertown historically has been kind of this interesting little area that is agriculturally dependent. It has the river that's running through it, and it just felt right. I didn't want to have, fun guy or, something kind of corny. I wanted some emotional connection to a geography, to a certain location that may resonate with people or may cause them to, look up, what is the Rock River,
Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of my thinking. We, gosling mushrooms.
Yeah.
It's the mascot, everybody, of the Watertown High School. It's the gosling. So, there's really some limitations, but yeah, I thought that was going to kind of be a neat homage to the area and to the Rock River Valley Basin.
I completely didn't put two and two together with the Plank Road out there. I wasn't sure. I know of Plank Road and Watertown Plank Road coming out even towards Milwaukee here, but yeah.
And our property here, the property, there's a wetland in back, and that wetland is a tributary that goes into the Rock River. So we are literally part of the watershed where we are right here. So yeah, it's kind of neat. No, but I didn't realize that either about Watertown. And the farmers market, which Missy manages, started in 1856, which is one of the longest running farmers markets in the state.
That's
so yeah,
amazing.
there's a kind of a history here in Watertown. So I didn't want to call it Watertown mushrooms. I just thought Rock River Valley sounded a little bit more mysterious, I guess.
Well, also what the first kindergarten in Watertown, first kindergarten, was that in the United States?
Correct. Right. Yeah. First kindergarten in the United States.
Very historical.
Yeah. So, Carl Scherz's wife started the first kindergarten here in the United States. So, all German. It was a largely German settlement. So there were two breweries in Watertown at one point.
Okay.
Yeah. So
that's amazing. So,
in fact, your great grandma, when she arrived to Watertown, went to church. There were two Catholic churches. She went to the church that happened to be the German Catholic Church, and they said the Mass in German. Wow. And she was Irish, and she couldn't believe. She's like, "Oh my God, where am I?" And then found St. Bernard's, which was on the other side of the river, which was Irish Catholic. So yeah, there's German heritage here is very strong.
So Kev, you alluded to this a little bit ago when you were talking about some of the research you've done and just how over the last few years, you kind of had an idea in a sense that this could work. But was there any other moment that you can think of that you knew that you might be able to turn this into something more than just growing mushrooms in your backyard?
Yeah, there were a couple of moments there. There's a process involved. You can grow these things as easily or as complicated as you want. And by that, I mean, any of you could purchase what's called a fruiting block, which is essentially a block of sterilized sawdust. It is literally a block, 8 pounds, and it will be fully colonized. There's a number of companies that do this. One of them is actually up in Peshtigo, Wisconsin, where we get a lot of our supplies. And they'll give you directions, and you can get this block, and they will tell you how to fruit it, how to grow mushrooms off of it. So you can do something very, very easy like that. In order to grow these, though, that's expensive. In order to grow these, you kind of have to start with it's not the seed, it's the mycelium. You have to start at really, starting to grow them from their origins. And that involves a number of different processes to, inoculate malt agar petri dishes and let those colonize. And then you transplant that into sterilized grain, rye, wheat, popcorn. I did popcorn one of the first few times.
Cool.
Coffee. Right. So these mushrooms mycelium will eat the grain, and then basically once that jar is white, it's fully colonized, you can transplant that into your substrate, which would be like the soil. You can transplant it into straw, pasteurized or sterilized straw. You can transplant it into sawdust, and then that mycelium will then grow in there. And basically what it'll do is then you will have your fruiting block that you spent $23 to purchase from the place up in Peshtigo. So you basically, and it's a time intensive process, which I have done, and I'm still kind of one leg in that world, one leg out, but it is also prone to contamination. You really have to do things in a sterile environment. Anytime you're dealing with food, obviously that goes without saying, but this in particular, because you're growing fungi, there's other fungi that can outcompete shiitake mushrooms. They can outcompete oyster. And by that, I mean, they can get into your substrate or into your grain, and they'll eat it. They'll beat the mycelium. Okay. So the key is to get it into a sterile environment that is beneficial and that is something that the mycelium will eat previous to any mold or anything else being introduced there that will beat it. So, and that's sometimes easier said than done. I've had some things happen with contamination. It happens. It's almost impossible to avoid, but you do some things in a lab type of setting. We don't have a lab, but I do have a lab table and gloves and, isopropyl alcohol. So things are being sterilized, so there's a whole process involved. You just can't, do things like that because it's just not going to work.
Yeah.
So it is somewhat involved, but you can do this as simply as you want. I mean, for example, one of the things that we were doing earlier in the spring was selling shiitake logs. And some of you may have seen those at Stein's. There's a number of these novelty type of garden shops, even online, will sell like a 18-inch shiitake log. So it's inoculated. And basically you can set it in your kitchen or wherever. And every 2 months or so, you're going to get mushrooms growing off of that. So we sold some of those. So I don't know if we'll get into that space necessarily, but we have been playing with some other kind of adjacent products potentially that are more food oriented. A lot of the mushroom growers will get into the world of selling the blocks, or they're selling the spawn. And so they do that. Very few of them are working in food. And by that, I mean, they're not creating products that have mushrooms in them or have mushroom flavoring in them. It's a licensing thing. I don't think people want to necessarily dive into a commercial kitchen per se, but Missy's a really good cook. And we have been playing around with a few different items and a few different recipes. We've tested them at the market. There's a very receptive audience at the market. So we've got some licensing that we're doing right now. And, at some point we'll probably get that rolling a little bit, but the primary revenue stream will remain the fresh mushrooms, at least for now.
That's really exciting, especially it's almost like you have this opportunity to try out, experiment with, you have Missy managing the local market, farmers market. And so what better place to offer that other than, giving mushrooms to your family, which you've done, which were amazing. So I think that's really cool to have that opportunity to just, again, test the market to see how people respond. And so far, it sounds like the market's been open for a month.
Correct.
Or so. You've had a lot of success, not only the market as a whole, but your product there as well.
And I mean, we're not able to grow that much, but we're growing, probably, 25 to 30 boxes that we're going to the market with. And going back to that, her being managing, looking back, the stars kind of aligned a little bit, when she was brought on as the market manager and now transitioning into an actual business was just kind of a no-brainer in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like it was just a very interesting symmetry that began to emerge that we really couldn't avoid. So yeah, it's great because she's gotten to be friends with all the vendors, and she's not from Watertown, everybody, but she's gotten to know people who I have known my entire lives, who come through as customers, who bring her a coffee or a donut or what have you. So it's really a lot of fun to see her kind of become part of the community via the market. And certainly there's an interest with mushrooms among that group as well. So it's been great.
Yeah. I love the social media posts where she's sampling different food each week.
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
Cool. Yeah.
And she takes pictures. Yeah. She does a really good job, So, and the vendors are thrilled. The vendors there are thrilled because she's actively promoting them, and and people are coming because of those huge pictures a lot of times.
Yeah, I mean the word of mouth and then social media obviously is just a huge way to get business. So, all right. So before we switch to another topic, I'm not going to ask you to choose your favorite child, but I am going to ask you to consider what's your favorite mushroom.
I have two.
Okay.
I love shiitake mushrooms, and if you're not familiar with shiitake mushrooms, they grow on wood. They have a large cap. They're Japanese. Shi is a tree in Japan. Take means mushroom. So anytime you hear the word take, that more than likely the letters in front of it are representative of a tree. So they grow on logs. They have very big caps, kind of like a portobello. They may not get as big as a portobello, but they're very good, very hearty, strong mushroom taste. And the other ones that I like are oyster mushroom, which is not typical looking mushroom with a cap like you all see in symbolism and kind of are conjured up in your mind when you think of mushrooms. So these kind of fan out a bit more on the cap, but Italian oyster mushrooms are really, I like the strong taste of the mushroom, and Italian oyster mushrooms have a very strong taste to them. They get quite large. You can eat a portion of the stems. Some of the stems on these mushrooms are just too tough, and we don't recommend eating them. You can certainly dehydrate them and grind them up. You'll have the flavoring, but yeah, so those are the two that I really like. And, growing up, it was all just button mushrooms. And we go to a place around here for prime rib, and they have portobello and with the steak, and it's delicious, So I lean towards really liking mushrooms. Missy, coincidentally, does not eat mushrooms. She doesn't like the texture. She likes the taste. So yeah, it's kind of funny, and that in part really is kind of what has driven her to investigate some of these food related products, just to try and see if she can build something up in that regard. So yeah, those are my two favorite. They're all good though.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
All right, let's switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about a fascination with Bigfoot.
Oh man, the freak flag's out now. So what do you want to know?
Where and why and how? No.
I'm a child of the 70s. I was born in 1965, and anybody who grew up, became of age in the 70s will remember a show with Leonard Nimoy. And it was called Leonard Nimoy, Spock, hosted a show called In Search Of. And In Search Of I think it was a half-hour long show, and they would do, Loch Ness Monster, UFOs. It was Leonard Nimoy, and they they did a segment on Bigfoot. And I can remember watching that as a little kid, and they showed a famous film. It's called the Patterson-Gimlin film, which was filmed in 1967 in Northern California. It's the one that everybody has seen. It's Will Ferrell and Elf in Central Park.
Yeah.
He is mimicking the Patterson-Gimlin film. Bob Patterson and Roger Gimlin filmed it. So there was always kind of a fascination there. And that kind of kept, I guess, going. It was probably latent for a while until some of these shows started popping up, Finding Bigfoot. And those are goofy. It's just ridiculous. But I've had two experiences I really can't quite make out what happened. One of them is somewhat anomalous. I was with a bunch of friends from the book business, and one of them had a cottage up in Rhinelander, northwest of Rhinelander. And if you look at the map of Rhinelander, that area, there's not a whole lot northwest of Rhinelander. There's a lot of swampland, a lot of lakes and stuff like that. And his cabin was on a little lake, and it was surrounded by this wilderness. And I remember one night I had gotten up and I'd used the bathroom. I got back into bed, and I heard what I've come to now recognize as a wood knock, which is basically, it sounds like somebody hitting a tree with a baseball bat way out in the middle of the woods at 3 a.m. outside of Rhinelander, Wisconsin. And I I heard two of them. And I remember laying in bed and just thinking, what was that? And so anyways, I don't even think I told the guys I was with when that happened. It was just kind of one of those things. But then, and so these shows were bubbling underneath the surface, and I was watching those and reading. And now with the popularity of YouTube and everything, you see videos of everything. So a lot of hoaxes and etc. But then I was at a vacation house again that we had rented with your mom and dad, and my sister Mary and her husband Jay, and Missy and I went up. It was in the UP, just over the Wisconsin border, at a place called Hagerman Lake. And it was great. It was on a lake, beautiful lake. Again, there's areas around this lake. It was a very inhabited lake, unlike the one that I was at in Rhinelander. But there was a section of this lake that was very wilderness, swamp area, not home. There weren't homes. It was all wetland and boggy and stuff like that. That was on one portion of the lake. Well, one morning I was woken up at 4:30 in the morning, and Missy and I were in the bedroom that was a walkout bedroom out of a walkout basement. Windows were open, and I was woken up by Missy at 4:30 in the morning. Sun's kind of coming up, and she jabs me in the side and says, "Kevin, what is that?" And I just sat there, and I heard a roar coming from across the lake that's a combination of a lion and the T-Rex from Jurassic Park. And there were three of them. And I knew directionally where it was, and I knew that there was nothing there. And even if there was something there, homes or what have you, somebody would needed to have had an amplifier. It was definite. It was loud. And so I don't know what that is or what that was, but other people have heard similar types of things out in the woods. And it's just kind of one of those things. And I guess I'm not a scientist, but I look at this kind of logically in a way, and that there are, tens of thousands of these reports. Man, you can throw anything in there for that matter, but some of them are more ridiculous than others. But with Bigfoot in particular, you have to assume that if you say that it's not real, they're all being hoaxed. They're imagining it. They're hallucinating. They're lying. And bear in mind now, a lot of these reports, military, clergy, doctors. I mean, it isn't just kind of, half-wits like me who said, "Hey, I heard this screaming out in the middle of the woods." I mean, there's a lot of people who have, and they won't reveal, their full names or whatever just to protect their profession. But so logically in my mind, I just started thinking, well, you know what? It's possible they could all be imagined or what have you. And then you get into sightings, and that your mind does something that's called pareidolia. which is the mind's ability to make sense out of something that doesn't make sense. So you see Snoopy in the clouds. That's pareidolia, right? So a lot of these sightings that people have, their mind goes to try to put something into something that it will recognize or that it knows. So some of these sightings may be, in fact, pareidolia. I've seen other videos that are really compelling. There's a lot of stuff that happens in northern Wisconsin and in northern Minnesota that is really difficult to explain. People finding trackways in the middle of winter in northern Minnesota that are 6 feet apart from one another, that are 16 inches long, and that go for 4 miles in the snow, barefoot, that are 2 inches deep in snow and mud, which it was, if it was a person, that person was 500 pounds.
Yeah.
So, there's just something, and again, I look at some of that stuff and you look at just what would it take to hoax that? That would be a pretty good hoax,
That's
so
a lot of effort.
I don't know. It's just kind of one of those things. And there's so many wingnuts in this world and so many, crackpot theories about the government knowing and this, that, and the other thing. Who knows? I don't go down those rabbit holes.
Yeah.
But it's kind of fun to think that there's something out there that we haven't quite wrapped our arms around.
I attribute to some of that too, to just think about in the history of time, whether it was the dinosaurs or, creatures or other animals that have evolved or don't exist or do exist. The other day I was working out at my apartment complex, and one of the channels that was on the TV was the BBC, and they're talking about the Komodo dragon. And I was watching it and I was like, are those still around? Like I had the kind of moment of like, oh yeah, duh, they are. But how big those things are, and they're protected because they're technically, still in the wild, obviously, but it really and
initial people, the guys who found those were labeled as kind of heretics. They called it a dragon. So first of all, dragons aren't real, but and Komodo is the island, I think, where they were. But they were kind of labeled as whack jobs for what they had seen, and it wasn't until other people went there and were like, oh yeah, these things are very real. And I haven't been all over the place. I've been to Europe once, been to Canada, been to Hawaii, but the world is a really big place, and there's a lot of space in the world that has not really been fully explored. And I'm thinking back to Jay, my brother-in-law Jay, my dad, and some others. You went one year up to Red Lake, Ontario, 6 hours north of the U.S. border. And one of the years that I was up there, the guy who owned this resort had a float plane, and he asked me if I wanted to go up, so he took me up. And this is Red Lake, Ontario, for those of you who don't know, is basically kind of where the road ends if you go straight north of, say, International Falls, Minnesota. So there are roads beyond that, but it gets pretty sparse. So anyways, we were a few miles south of there. And Bill Prindick, who is the owner, took me up in this plane. And I'll never forget, it was in twilight, the sun was still up, but you get up there and all you could see it looked like puddles, but they were all lakes surrounded tight by trees. And I'll never forget Bill, he pointed up to the north, and through the headset, I heard him say, it looks like this all the way to the Arctic Circle. And I went and I looked at a map, and I'm like, you know what? He's right. There's like nothing there, a few reservation villages maybe here and there, but so it is solid. And it kind of gets you thinking like, wow, there could be a lot of stuff out there that has not ever been walked on by a human. More than likely, there probably is, you think about it, we've discovered 10% of the ocean, they think. So, there's a lot that we don't know about.
Well, and the other thing I always think about, not always think about, when in just these conversations too, about you have the animal side, but then also the North Sentinelese island, where that population has, they're just on their own, and they have an agreement with the neighboring country that
I think
is
India.
like India, yes, that leave us be. And it's been like that for hundreds of years. I mean, then the last article I read was like there's between 50 and 400 people living on that island. But
Right.
think about that. That's a whole different life.
Primitive.
Yeah.
And the thing it is, I mean, they kill missionaries. And the Indian government doesn't send the police in there to arrest anybody. I mean, and it's really kind of, and I don't know why people go there, why they think they're going to be able to convince them. I don't know if anybody really has an understanding of their language or a lot of their core beliefs and culture. So I think people are kind of going in there flying blind, holding a Bible. Not that that's a bad thing, but and I think it doesn't end well for them. But yeah, those people, I mean, think about what they think when they see a jet, or something, or even a ship. I'm sure their oral history is very strong in that regard in terms of stories they're telling one another and relaying down to the generations. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure they probably think it's the gods or the devil, or I don't know what. Because people have flown over there fairly low in planes, and I mean, they're throwing spears at them and arrows.
Yeah, I think it was like the last person that attempted was 2017 or 18. Some fisherman, or I'm sorry,
right?
He was dropped off by a missionary was dropped off by some guy, and that guy they threw him back out into the sea.
Yeah, he basically saw it happen on the shore.
Yeah. It's incredible.
So there's, and I mean, who knows? Maybe there's other beings that are like that.
And you touched on some of those TV shows, but the one I really liked, and it was kind of in probably 10, 15 years ago, was, again, it's a TV show, but that Monster Quest. That's where I started to kind of get into some of those. And I hadn't heard of a lot of these different creatures, we'll say, but that's where I was like, oh, you know what? Keep an open mind. You never really know.
And the producer of that show, I believe, is the same one who did Finding Bigfoot. And I believe he's the same one who has done, there's another one, Expedition Bigfoot. That's a more recent one. And that guy is also connected with the dude who's known as Survivor Man, Les Stroud. And he's had some interesting experiences too. He's been whooped at like an ape or a chimpanzee would whoop in Alaska, and he's had a few things that have happened that he really can't quite explain either. So yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of fun just to think about it. I don't talk about that with too many people though.
Well,
I guess that's changing.
Yeah. We'll give your information out. And,
yeah, right. Yeah. So, this dude grows mushrooms. He believes in Bigfoot. Wow.
This could get a lot of followers. This could be great.
Yeah.
On that note, to wrap things up, I've got one last question. So obviously the idea of the podcast and the title, it's later than you think. Are there any particular areas of your life that remind you to kind of slow down and enjoy the moment and appreciate the little things?
Yeah. I just turned 60 3 weeks ago, and I really don't have a problem with age necessarily, or aging for that matter. It's just kind of a reality, and it beats the alternative. But I'm having more thoughts about that than I ever had before, and that being like, where this is all going, what the end, like how much time do it's really interesting, and it feels like, was it Steinbeck or maybe it was Shakespeare, Winter of Our Discontent. And if you look at your life, I was thinking about this the other day, not because of this question necessarily, but you look at your life like a season, a year of seasons, you're in your 40s. So let's say you're probably in mid-June, I'm in my 60s. I'm probably in about the second or third week in August, and you just kind of start to look at things like that. And I still, there's still things that I probably worry about that I shouldn't worry about, that are just kind of, why do I even focus on some of that stuff? I think that's just human nature. But I think I'm more prone to kind of pull back before I go down the rabbit hole too far with worry or concern. I tend to pull back a little bit more and, just have an attitude where it's like, don't sweat it. Things always work out, which they do. So yeah. And as far as like really those moments, I think seeing your kids grow into adulthood and become their own people. And you're right. I don't have a favorite. They're all unique in their own regard. I have 5, everybody. So 3 of my own and two step kids. So it's a very interesting perspective, and they are all dramatically different from one another. But there's a lot of joy in just seeing them each kind of carve their path. It wouldn't be the path that I'd necessarily have taken. Mine seemed to be a little bit more predictable, going to college, get a teaching job, coach, that whole thing. And these guys, they're taking different paths, and it's really kind of interesting to see them flourish and to see them learn and grow on the paths that they're on. I mean, if somebody told me that, 2 of my kids would be living in Manhattan right now, and another one would be working at Big Sky, in the ski business, and another one, is a very high functioning, extremely entertaining autism individual, and another one is African American, I would have told them they were nuts, but here I am. Yeah. And it's fun, it really is. It's fun to see. But getting back to the whole aging thing, yeah, I'm starting to kind of feel that. I feel a little bit in my body, I guess, sometimes, but I think age is a state of mind. So you can tell yourself you're as old as you are, and you're probably going to start to feel that. So sometimes you kind of buck that trend, and you just have to kind of pull yourself out of that. So,
and I think our family does a good job too of connecting, and maybe not getting together as often as we used to, just because of the 4. Your 3 siblings, including my mom, and our family has grown so much over time, and the schedules get busy and life gets in the way, but we're really good about still connecting, talking through text messaging on the text chain, or getting together to go to Door County. I think that's part of it too, to remind ourselves who and what are important, knowing that we're not all always going to be here. And so I like those traditions that we all have it individually in our own families, but then also together.
And that goes back. I mean, that's no accident that has happened, and that's a generational thing going back on your grandma's side as well as somewhat on your grandpa's side. But, the importance of family and showing up, and being present at the times that matter, holidays, birthdays, things like that. And you're right. Families evolve and they grow and things change. Nothing is ever constant. But the point is that you have that base of that experience and that commonality. And that family, no matter how long it's been since you've seen them, goes up. And that really is the key. I've seen Mike once since last June. But we talk and it's just, that's how it is. I'm not lamenting that or anything of the sort. I'm happy for him. But yeah, I mean, is that my preference? Not really. It'd be cool to see him a little bit more, but you know what?
Yeah.
He's living a life. I mean, he spent 2 years on a yacht in South Florida and went all over the place up to Nova Scotia. And now he's out in Big Sky, Montana. So you know what? More power to him. So,
yeah. It allows the rest of us, which again, the traditional path is great for some, but for others, it not only is it good for them to experience what they are interested in, but also it allows the rest of us to live vicariously through them. Right. I mean, I love thinking about Elizabeth and James in Manhattan, because that's my favorite city that I've visited before, and I've been there a couple of times, and I will be going back hopefully sooner than later. But that just is exciting to think about that, and then I can't even imagine what working on the mountain is like, but it's just like, that's so cool too, to hear that. And
yeah, no, and they're having different, I mean, on the mountain, all the workers have to have bear spray. So there's that. I mean, so grizzlies are a constant threat. And so I'm talking to Elizabeth and James, it'll be anywhere But it's interesting talking to people who are actually not going to Grand Central Station to see it as a tourist, but because it is along their transit route and they actually are using that as their stop, or a Penn Station or what have you. So it's really cool to hear them, and I'll talk to them once in a while. And I just left, Grand Central. I've got to walk up to, 7th Avenue or whatever. And it's really cool that they're able to do that. It's really expensive to live there, but it is like Letterman, like the host of Letterman or the MC would always say, it's the greatest city on the earth. And he's right.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
Well, hey, Kev, before we wrap this up, I just want to give you a moment to do a quick shout out for the business and where the Rock River Valley Mushrooms, where people can find you, not only physical space, but as far as online goes with the presence.
Yep. So you can find us online at gratefulfungi.com. Rock River Valley Mushrooms, Gourmet Mushrooms didn't translate very well to a URL. So I went out and I actually was searching on things that might be somewhat memorable. Gratefulfungi.com is our website. And yes, I like the Grateful Dead, but I like other stuff. So, and you can find us every Tuesday morning in summer all the way to the end of October. You can, I say us in the plural, you will find Missy and my stepdaughter Maddie manning our booth at the Watertown Farmers Market from 7 until noon every Tuesday, and that's located at Riverside Park in Watertown. So I strongly encourage you, if you're interested. It's a great farmers market. There are food vendors. We have Mediterranean food vendors coming from Madison, Asian food vendors coming from Milwaukee. We have a crepe food vendor, as well as all loads of produce and all kinds of great stuff. So really encourage you to come and certainly stop by Rock River Valley Mushrooms and pick up some mushrooms while you're there as well. So they'd love to see you.
That is awesome. Well, thanks again, Kev. I really appreciate you taking the time.
You're welcome. It's been awesome. Thanks for asking me.
Of course. I want to thank my Uncle Kevin once again for joining us on this episode. Hope you were able to learn a little bit more about the mushroom growing process, as I was. And perhaps you gained a little bit of more intrigue about Bigfoot and other possibly real or mythical creatures that exist in this world. If you do see something in the wild and you take a video, please make sure it is not grainy or blurry so the rest of the world can believe you. If you enjoyed today's episode and you're liking the podcast, if you haven't already, please make sure to like, subscribe, share on your social media, tell your friends. Have a great rest of your week, and we will see you next time.